Have you ever noticed that the sentence, "just think positive," can make you feel even worse?
Yes, it's strange, isn't it? Someone is trying to encourage you, but somehow you end up feeling guilty because you can't suddenly become happy.
Exactly.
It's almost as if they're asking you to press a button inside your mind. Oh, you're sad? Just switch to happy.
If only it worked like that.
If it did, nobody would have bad days.
That's true.
And I think most of us already know we should be more positive. The problem isn't knowing. The problem is how.
I used to believe positive thinking meant pretending everything was fine.
Really?
Yeah. If something went wrong, I thought I had to smile and say, everything happens for a reason.
Even if you didn't believe it?
Especially when I didn't believe it.
Oh.
It felt fake.
I think that's the word many people are looking for.
Fake.
Because life isn't always wonderful. Sometimes you're tired. Sometimes plans fail. Sometimes people disappoint you.
And sometimes you simply wake up in a bad mood without knowing why.
Exactly.
So maybe the real question isn't, how can I become positive? Maybe it's, what does positive actually mean? I think that's a much more interesting question.
I agree. Because if our definition is wrong, then our effort is going in the wrong direction too.
Right.
You know, I had a conversation with a friend recently, and she said something that stayed with me.
What did she say?
She said, "I'm tired of pretending every bad thing is secretly good."
That's honest.
Very honest.
And I don't think she's alone.
Neither do I.
Maybe you're listening right now while driving to work, or walking, or washing the dishes.
And maybe you've had one of those weeks where every little thing seems to go wrong.
Your alarm doesn't ring.
You spill coffee.
Someone sends an email that ruins your morning.
The supermarket doesn't have the one thing you wanted.
None of these things are disasters.
But together?
They can make the whole day feel heavy.
So if someone says, "just be positive," your first thought might be,
You clearly don't understand. It's funny.
what?
I don't actually think people mean anything bad when they say it.
No, I don't think so either.
They're trying to help.
They're just offering the wrong tool.
Exactly.
It's like giving someone an umbrella after they've already been standing in the rain for an hour.
Better than nothing.
But maybe not what they needed most.
So, today, I don't really want us to talk about positive thinking.
Interesting.
I want us to talk about something much smaller.
Smaller?
Yes.
Now you've made me curious.
Good.
Because if we're not talking about positive thinking, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the way we look at things.
Oh,
Not the situation itself.
but the angle.
Exactly.
Like looking through a different window.
Or wearing a different pair of glasses.
I like that image. And I think this is something we can all practice in everyday life.
Yes. And as we talk about it today, you'll also hear some useful English expressions you can use when you want to explain your feelings or look at a situation differently.
So if you're enjoying the conversation, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep making these episodes for you.
And now, let's look at what this actually means in real life. Imagine two people standing in exactly the same place,
They're looking at exactly the same street,
exactly the same weather,
exactly the same people,
but one notices the traffic,
and the other notices the trees.
one hears the noise.
The other hears birds.
The world hasn't changed.
Only their attention has.
That's the idea I couldn't understand for years.
Because?
I thought changing my perspective meant changing reality.
But those aren't the same thing.
Not at all.
That's actually quite comforting,
Why?
because changing reality is often impossible. But changing where I place my attention?
That's something we can practice.
Exactly. Although, here comes the disagreement.
Maybe? I do think there's a danger.
Go on.
If we always try to look on the bright side,
Yes?
couldn't we end up ignoring real problems?
That's a fair question.
Because I don't want people to think we're saying, just smile and everything will magically improve.
Oh, I completely agree with that.
Really?
Absolutely.
I thought you were going to argue with me.
No, I think we're talking about two different things.
Explain.
Ignoring a problem isn't optimism. It's avoidance.
That's an important difference.
Very important.
So what does real optimism look like?
I think it begins with one sentence.
Which is?
This situation is difficult,
Okay.
but that isn't the whole story.
I like that.
Notice what happened there.
You didn't deny the problem.
Exactly.
You accepted it first.
Then I made room for another possibility.
So instead of saying everything is wonderful,
We're saying there may be another way to see this,
that's much easier to believe.
because it's true. Actually,
What?
this reminds me of a Saturday a few months ago.
Oh?
I'd been planning something all week.
Really?
Oh yes, I was ridiculously excited about it.
Now I want to know what happened. I can already hear there's a story coming.
There is.
And judging by your smile,
It didn't go the way I expected.
I had a feeling.
Let's just say the weather had its own opinion.
I knew it.
I'd planned this lovely Saturday. I'd packed a small bag, made sandwiches, filled a bottle of water, and even remembered sunscreen.
That's impressive.
You sound surprised.
Well, you once admitted you packed for a weekend trip and forgot your toothbrush.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
I couldn't resist.
See, this is why I should never tell you my embarrassing stories.
Oh no, please keep telling them. They're excellent material.
Fine. Anyway, everything was ready. I opened the curtains.
And?
Rain.
Heavy rain?
Not just rain.
Uh-oh.
The kind of rain that says, don't even think about leaving the house.
I know exactly the type.
It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was determined.
Determined rain.
Yes! It looked like the sky had made a decision.
So your plans disappeared in about 10 seconds?
Less than that.
How did you feel?
Honestly,
Always.
annoyed.
Fair enough.
I'd spent the whole week looking forward to that day.
That's often the hardest part.
Exactly.
It's not only losing the activity.
It's losing the expectation.
That's a really good way to put it.
Sometimes we're disappointed twice.
Twice.
And once because something doesn't happen.
And the second time?
Because we'd already imagined how happy we were going to be. That imagined future suddenly disappears.
I've never thought about disappointment like that before.
Neither had I until that morning.
So what happened next?
Well,
Did you try to convince yourself the rain was wonderful? I absolutely love getting wet.
no,
This is the best weather ever.
definitely not.
Good.
I actually sat on the sofa for about 15 minutes feeling a little sorry for myself.
Which sounds perfectly normal.
I think so too.
Sometimes people rush past that moment.
Yes.
They think every negative feeling has to disappear immediately.
But feelings don't usually work that way.
No.
If someone had walked into my living room and said, Emma, just think positive, I probably wouldn't have appreciated it.
Probably.
Okay. I definitely wouldn't have appreciated it.
So what changed?
Nothing.
Really?
At least not immediately. The rain was still there.
Right.
My picnic was still impossible.
Also true.
But after a while, I noticed something.
What was it?
I suddenly realized I hadn't had a completely free day at home for months.
Ah,
I was always rushing somewhere.
work,
Friends,
shopping,
family.
life.
Exactly.
So instead of asking,
How can I save my original plan?
you asked something different.
Yes.
Which was?
Since I'm already here, what can today become instead?
That's a beautiful question.
I think it changed everything.
Notice something, everyone.
Hmm?
Emma didn't pretend the rain was good.
No,
She accepted that the picnic was gone.
completely.
Then she asked a new question.
What else is possible?
That's very different from forced happiness.
Completely different.
It reminds me of changing the destination on your GPS.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Imagine you're driving somewhere, and suddenly a road is closed.
You could sit there all day complaining.
Or you could choose another route.
The closed road is still closed.
You haven't changed reality.
You've changed your response.
Exactly.
Actually, that's something listeners can use today.
I think so too.
The next time something doesn't go as planned,
Big or small.
try asking yourself one simple question.
What can this become instead?
You don't need the perfect answer.
Just an honest one.
Maybe your meeting is canceled.
So you finally have time to finish something important.
Maybe the restaurant is full.
So you discover a cafe you've never visited before.
Maybe your train is delayed.
And you finally read those 10 pages you've been meaning to read all week.
Does that make the delay enjoyable?
No,
Does it remove the inconvenience?
not at all.
But it gives the situation another side.
Like a coin.
Exactly.
One side says, this isn't what I wanted.
The other side quietly asks, can this still be useful?
I love that word.
Useful?
Yes.
Why?
Because people often search for happiness too quickly. But usefulness is easier to find.
That's interesting.
If I lose an afternoon because my internet stops working,
That's frustrating,
very.
especially these days.
But maybe it's useful because I finally organized the pile of papers that's been sitting on my desk for weeks.
Or maybe you call someone you've been meaning to call.
Exactly.
Or maybe
What?
you finally clean your camera. I knew that would get your attention.
It probably needs cleaning. I was waiting for you to admit it.
You're surprisingly accurate.
That's because I know you.
Fair enough.
But seriously, I think there's a small danger here too.
Another disagreement?
Maybe a tiny one.
Go on.
I don't think every difficult moment needs an immediate lesson.
Interesting.
Sometimes we put pressure on ourselves to find meaning too quickly.
I think you're right.
If something painful happens, it's okay not to have the answer today.
That's true.
Sometimes perspective arrives later,
Much later.
weeks later.
Or even years.
Yes.
And I think that's an important reminder. Because social media often tells us every setback should immediately become a success story.
Life usually isn't that neat.
No.
Sometimes all you can honestly say is,
Today was difficult.
and that's enough.
Then maybe tomorrow?
You'll see something you couldn't see today.
I like that.
It's gentler.
And I think more realistic.
Exactly.
Which brings me to something I've started doing recently.
Oh,
It's incredibly simple.
those are usually the best ideas.
I call it the at least habit.
I'm curious.
It sounds almost too simple to be useful.
It sounds almost too simple to be useful.
That's exactly what I thought.
So, how does it work?
Whenever something doesn't go the way I wanted, I stop for a moment and begin one sentence.
Which sentence?
At least,
That's it?
that's it.
Give me an example.
Okay. Last week, I missed a bus.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
Me too.
Especially when you can actually see the bus driving away.
That's exactly what happened.
Ouch.
My first reaction was, great, now I'm going to be late.
Very normal.
Then I remembered my little habit.
The at least habit.
Right.
So what did you say?
At least the next bus is coming in 15 minutes.
Hmm.
Then another one appeared.
Another at least?
Yes.
Go on.
At least I finally have time to reply to those messages.
That's practical.
Then another one.
Really?
At least I'm not standing here in the rain. It wasn't a perfect morning.
But your mind slowly became less negative.
Exactly.
I noticed something interesting.
What?
None of your at least sentences were huge.
That's true.
You didn't suddenly say, this is the greatest thing that has ever happened.
No.
They were small,
Very small.
which makes them believable.
I think that's the secret.
Because our minds usually reject ideas that feel impossible,
Exactly.
but they often accept ideas that feel reasonable.
That's why I like at least.
It creates just enough space for another thought.
Not a fake thought.
An honest one.
Let's try a few examples together.
Good idea.
Imagine you wake up late. What's your first thought?
I've ruined my morning. Fair enough.
Now let's add at least.
Go ahead.
At least I can still make today productive.
Nice.
Not perfect.
But possible.
Exactly.
Okay, here's another one.
I'm ready.
You make dinner,
Hmm.
and you accidentally burn it.
That has happened to me.
I remember.
You don't have to sound so confident. Fine, continue. What's your at least?
At least, I learned I shouldn't leave the kitchen while checking my phone.
Practical. And maybe,
Yes?
at least I still have bread. Sometimes bread saves the evening.
That's very true.
Your turn.
Okay.
You spend hours preparing for a meeting. And at the last minute, it's canceled.
My first thought would probably be disappointment.
Understandable.
Then I'd try,
Go on.
at least I'm fully prepared for the next meeting.
That's a good one.
Or,
Yes,
at least I now have an unexpected free hour.
which you can use however you choose.
Exactly.
You know what I like about this exercise?
Tell me.
It trains your attention.
That's a great way to describe it.
We often think our attention works automatically,
But it can also be directed.
like a flashlight.
Oh, I love that image.
Imagine you're holding a flashlight in a dark room.
Okay.
Wherever you point it,
That's what you notice.
the room contains many things.
But the light only shows one small area.
Our attention can be similar.
Sometimes we accidentally keep shining the light on the problem.
Again and again.
We replay the mistake.
We replay the conversation.
We replay the disappointment.
Meanwhile,
We forget to move the flashlight.
exactly.
That doesn't mean the problem disappears. No. It simply means the problem is no longer the only thing we can see.
I think that's the heart of today's conversation.
Me too.
We aren't asking people to deny reality.
We're inviting them to widen it.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And I think that's where perspective begins.
Looking at it differently.
That's one of today's useful expressions.
Yes.
Instead of saying everything is terrible,
You might say,
looking at it differently.
This gives me a chance to slow down.
Or,
On the other hand,
I've learned something important.
or
The upside is,
I won't make the same mistake next time.
notice that each phrase creates a bridge.
A bridge
Yes,
between the problem?
and another perspective.
I like that image.
Because many people think perspective changes happen all at once.
Like flipping a switch.
Exactly.
But I don't think that's true.
Neither do I.
I think they're built sentence by sentence,
Thought by thought.
choice by choice.
Which also means anyone can begin,
Even today.
even with something very small.
In fact,
Hmm?
I'd like to give everyone a little challenge.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Nothing difficult.
Good.
Sometime today, something probably won't go as planned.
It doesn't have to be a big problem.
In fact, it's better if it's something ordinary.
Maybe you wait longer than expected.
Maybe someone changes a plan.
Maybe you forget something.
When that happens,
Don't force yourself to feel happy.
don't pretend it's wonderful.
Simply pause.
Take one slow breath.
Then ask yourself,
What can this become instead?
or at least,
See what answer appears,
it may not change your day.
but it might change your next 5 minutes.
And sometimes,
5 minutes is where real change begins.
and sometimes,
5 minutes is where real change begins.
you know, Daniel, something else has been on my mind while we've been talking.
What's that?
I think many of us believe positive people are simply born that way.
Ah, yes.
As if some people wake up smiling every single day.
I used to believe that.
Really?
Absolutely.
What changed your mind?
I started paying attention to the people I admired.
And
I noticed something surprising.
go on.
They weren't people without problems.
That's true.
They were people who had practiced responding differently.
That's an important distinction.
Very.
We often admire the result.
But we don't see the practice behind it.
Exactly.
Think about learning English.
That's a perfect example.
Nobody becomes fluent because they studied for one afternoon.
They improve because they keep showing up.
Conversation after conversation.
Mistake after mistake.
Day after day.
Perspective works in a similar way.
I think so too.
It's not a personality,
It's a habit.
a habit you build,
Sometimes slowly.
sometimes very slowly,
And that's okay.
because progress is still progress.
There's another phrase we've used several times today without really pointing it out.
Which one?
I see what you mean.
Oh, yes.
That's such a useful expression.
Especially when you don't completely agree with someone.
Exactly.
Instead of saying, you're wrong,
You can say,
I see what you mean, but...
it sounds respectful.
And it keeps the conversation open.
Let's try it.
Okay,
I'll say something.
I'm listening.
I think bad days should be avoided at all costs. What would you say?
I see what you mean, but I don't think bad days can always be avoided.
Nice.
Your turn.
All right.
If something goes wrong, you should immediately look on the bright side.
I see what you mean, but sometimes people need a little time before they can do that.
Perfect.
Notice how neither of us started an argument.
We acknowledged the other person's idea first.
Then we added another perspective.
That's useful English.
And it's useful communication.
Sometimes they're the same thing.
I think language isn't only about vocabulary.
It's also about relationships,
The words we choose can make people feel understood.
which is why I love the phrase, that makes sense.
Yes.
Imagine someone tells you they're having a difficult week.
Instead of rushing to fix it,
You could simply say, "That makes sense."
Such a small sentence, but it carries a lot of kindness.
Sometimes people don't need advice first.
They need understanding first.
Exactly.
Then, when they're ready,
You can gently ask,
looking at it differently, is there anything useful you can take from this?
notice the difference,
You're inviting.
not forcing.
That feels much more human.
I think so too.
Before we finish, let's quickly remember today's main idea.
Good idea.
Step 1,
Accept the situation.
don't pretend it isn't difficult.
Step 2,
Ask a new question.
what can this become instead?
Or
At least,
step 3,
look for something useful.
not something perfect.
Something useful.
Let's repeat those one more time.
Accept,
Ask,
notice,
accept,
ask.
notice,
One last time.
accept,
Ask.
notice.
Those 3 small steps are much easier to remember than telling yourself to be positive.
I completely agree.
And remember,
You don't have to master this today.
or tomorrow,
It's a skill,
skills improve with practice,
just like listening,
just like speaking.
just like learning English.
So today, after this episode ends, pay attention to one small disappointment.
Not your biggest problem.
Just one ordinary moment.
Maybe someone is late.
Maybe the weather changes.
Maybe your plans become different.
When that happens,
Remember your new questions.
what can this become instead?
At least,
You may be surprised by your own answer.
we certainly have been.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us today,
We hope this conversation helped you practice your English.
and perhaps helped you see your day from a slightly different angle.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love to know your answer to one question.
Tell us in the comments.
What's one small situation that didn't go as planned recently?
And how did you choose to look at it differently?
Your answer might encourage someone else who's listening.
And that's a wonderful reason to share it.
Until next time,
Keep listening, keep learning, and remember,
progress, not perfection.
bye everyone.
See you in the next episode.